Ah yes, the days of being a beginner photographer were interesting. And one of the hardest parts of being a beginner was learning how to edit and learning how to edit well. That is what we are talking about in today's video, is how to take some of those beginner techniques, which some people would call mistakes, and then bring you into the future that is now as a pro photograph editor. Let's go. Quick rundown of what I'll be editing on today. So I'm gonna be working exclusively in Lightroom, and this beautiful monitor that we'll be editing on is the ViewSonic VP27854 4K Ultra HD monitor. And we'll also be using this Monogram console. They are also the two sponsors of today's video. But here's why it's great to use these two things in tandem for your photo editing. First of all, this monitor is 4K. So you can see every pimple, I mean pixel. See what I did there? It also has ridiculously awesome and super accurate colors. It also has a USB-C port, so when connecting it directly to my laptop, which we're doing today, it makes it super easy and there's no need for a dongle. This device called the Monogram console is really cool. It's completely modular, so you can take off pieces of it and customize it however you want. Really, it just makes editing your photos or editing anything, whether you're working in Premiere as well, just super immersive and intuitive. Monogram has also worked with Adobe to create the most natural integrations with their programs like Lightroom. So I'll explain more about specifically what each of these little turny knobs and buttons does as we go throughout the video. First thing we're gonna be doing is editing a portrait, and we're gonna focus on the tone curve and explaining a little bit about how that works. So, as you guys can see over to my right, I have my laptop open because this Monogram console is a fairly new addition to my desk setup, so it's just giving me a guideline of what each knob does, because there's a lot of different things that this does, and this just helps remind me what each knob, button, everything does. So right over here on the console is a little screen, and this tells you what profile you're in. So right now I'm in the tone curve profile, and how I would advance to the next few profiles is just by pressing this button here. That brings me forward, and this brings me back to the current profile I'm on, which is tone curves. Now all of these modules, so these dials, these buttons, this orbiter module is what it's called. I prefer spinny thing. Now they're all set up to make different adjustments in my tone curve. First thing let's do to this photo. So there are some basic corrections already applied. We're working in the parametric curve today, because if you're new to the tone curve, okay, this is basically like your training wheels for using the tone curve. And if you don't know anything about using a tone curve at all, I'll have a video linked at the top up here to give you a full breakdown on what it does. But in short, over here to the right on the top of this diagonal line, these are your highlights. And as you go down here, these are your blacks, and then your shadows, mid-tones, etc. So as you raise a point, you're lifting those blacks, those shadows, those highlights. As you drag it down, you are crushing or flattening your highlight or your blacks. What a beginner would usually do when they're delving into tone curves to start off is probably a simple S-curve. So if we were adjusting the highlights, again, as a beginner, I would probably raise those. And I'm using one of the dials here to do that on the Monogram console. And then they would brush the darks, do like a simple little S-curve. But as you can see, if you raise your highlights too much, it's not really very flattering on this photo. It definitely made the photo punchier, but it isn't exactly a nice look. There are definitely way more subtle ways of still making the photo pop. So that's what I'm going to show you guys how to do right now. What I'm noticing is that there's a bit of shine on her forehead and on her cheekbone, and I know that just by bringing down the highlights a little bit, it'll just smooth that. I also just like the look of a flattened highlight. So I'm gonna bring down the darks a little bit. So this shadow split knob, it basically just moves where your adjustment is happening. And again, because we're in the parametric tone curve, like I said, it gives you training wheels, so you can't make any adjustment that is almost too intense without it creating a really smooth line throughout the whole curve. Like I said, with the parametric tone curve, you can only do so many adjustments in here. So I can give you guys a few little mechanical things that I usually do to my photos. So I'll make 3 points, and especially with the blacks here, I'll just take the furthest point to the left. I'll bring that up a bit, and then I'll just crunch these dark shadows, bring this back up, and it creates this really still, rich black. All of the descriptive words you use to talk about tone curves sound so pretentious, I'm realizing as I say them out loud. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So here is that before and after. While it may appear to some of you that these edits are very basic and very subtle, it actually goes a long way in making your work stand out from the rest. You don't always have to go above and beyond and make these really big adjustments to your image to prove that you're a pro. Sometimes it's those little tweaks and making them in all the right places that make for a professional photograph. Next, we're going to be editing a product photo. And still life photography can be one of the most challenging and time-consuming genres to edit because it's very hard to tell a story about an inanimate object. And the area in Lightroom we're going to be focusing on now is local adjustments. So I'm going to click forward to my next profile. So what a basic photographer would do is probably stay in the basics panel over here and just make some overarching, or maybe, you know, maybe they would even stay in the tone curve, but they're just making general adjustments to the entire image. But what we want to do, what's going to completely level up this photo, is adding localized adjustments. So what does that mean? It means we're going to be using a combination of the graduated filter, radial filter, and brush tool. I'm gonna start with the graduated filter. The light is naturally coming from this side of the image, so I just wanna emphasize that.
When I woke up, I remembered it, but just a moment ago.
This is fun. I'm having a great time. So you just pull your graduated filter on this side, and then I can use the spinning module and darken this side of the image. Okay, so now I want to use, not the radial yet, I want to use the brush tool, and because the focus of the image is on the monogram console, I am literally just going to color that in. And if you've ever been doing this and accidentally getting some of your brush tool effect all over the place, you can hit O and see exactly where you've been applying this effect. And if you want to erase the area that you've kind of colored outside of the lines here, just hold down Option, and you can literally erase all of your mistakes, and just hit O again to turn off that adjustment. And then same thing, I can use the orbiter module to adjust the amount of exposure. Last thing I'm going to do is add a radial filter, just to emphasize the center of the image. That looks pretty good to me. And there's the before and after. So the overall effect that these 3 localized adjustments had on this image is not only did it emphasize where the light is actually being drawn from, so the light is coming from the bottom left of the image and it kind of gets darker towards the top right, so it adds that contrast there. It also really naturally draws your eye to the monogram console in the image. It focuses you on the orbiter module in the center here, and it doesn't require a lot of effort to know what the photographer is trying to draw your eye towards in the image. Next, we're going to be editing a landscape photo that I took a few years ago because that's when we were allowed to travel. And no, I haven't posted this yet. Please don't come for me. Editing my photos can sometimes give me anxiety because there are so many. When it comes to landscape editing, one of the most important factors of this is color. It really emphasizes your photo and can differentiate it from the rest depending on which colors you use and the amount, the saturation, the luminance, all of those things. What most beginners do with landscape photos, okay? This is a rookie mistake, and it's just like the telltale sign of a beginner when I see a photo like this. That vibrance slider is
Hey video creators, with Envato Elements you can create better videos. How? With unlimited downloads of millions of creative assets, all with commercial licenses for one low cost. Because no matter which video you're creating, Envato Elements has everything you need. Get creative with unlimited downloads of royalty-free stock footage, video templates, audio, and millions of other creative assets.
Whoa. All right, people, let's move on. So this is where Mike stands, and this is where the dinosaur comes in.
Yeah, Envato Elements is where you find and download everything. Motion graphics, dinosaurs, and create even more with
is just cranked, okay? The saturation slider is cranked. Contrast, cranked. It's important to note that you can add contrast to your image without actually touching the contrast slider at all. If you know a little bit behind color theory, then you'll understand what colors complement or what colors contrast, and that can really make your image pop. What the HSL color panel does is it breaks down each color in your image into its own slider for hue, saturation, and luminance. So you've got a slider for every color in each of these categories, and I have now added them to my Monogram console. So I never need to look down at my keyboard or move my mouse. It's very intuitive here, and I can just click through and keep my eyes on the panels here and on the image the entire time, which is kind of cool. What most people gravitate towards when they first come across a landscape photo is they want to take the blues in the sky and they want to saturate them, or usually lean towards changing them towards like a teal hue. And I like to go in a different route. Sometimes I like adding a little bit of a purpley hue to my blues, so that is what I did here. And I'm actually going to take the greens and warm them up a bit, make them a little bit more on the yellow side rather than cooling them down into like a bluey green. And then really it just comes down to like clicking through the panels here and finessing everything until it's in a place where I like it. And you'll notice that because this photo is a stitched photo from my drone, oftentimes when you stitch them together, it can look a little oversaturated, a little heavy on the contrast. So what I'm actually gonna do is tone a lot of that back to make it look more realistic and a little more like a painting and not overdone. I'm gonna add a graduated filter from the top right because that's where the sun's coming from, and increase the temperature on that a little bit so it looks like natural sunlight. And then in the opposite corner, the bottom right, I'm going to add another graduated filter and just make that a little bit darker to emphasize the rays of the sun and the dark shadows rolling over the hills. And now here is the before and after. Now let's color grade. And if this seems a little daunting to you as well, because you're like, what the heck is the point of this? I've just adjusted all my colors in the HSL color panel. Well, this is where you can add, I would describe it as a specific look or effect to your photo. So if you're going for a film look, for example, you can play around with tinting the highlights, midtones, and shadows to get a desired look or effect. And it's more general than fine-tuning each little color here and there. So that's what I'm going to show you guys right now. So I've got one profile set up for the highlights, one profile set up for the midtones, and one set up for the shadows. So let's start with the highlights now. This is one section where less is more as well. I'm going to keep this on the blue side. Yeah, I like a cool blue. And honestly, I usually just skip the midtones and focus on the shadows. Now let's go for that. Great. Easy, less is more. I wouldn't do much more than this. And once again, here is this photo with no HSL and no color grading, and here it is again with all of those adjustments applied. Well, look at you. You're well on your way to being a professional photo editor. And all it took was a few minutes with me. So you're welcome. Before I head out, I want to tell you about this awesome contest that ViewSonic Color Pro is hosting where you can win a prize pack. Some of those prizes include a ViewSonic Color Pro professional monitor, a monogram console, and a permanent license to Capture One, and a premium membership to the Shoot the Frame photo contest platform, and more. Enter the contest by submitting a photo that you took, and the theme is new adventure. So to me, that means going somewhere I haven't been before, trying something new I've never tried before. It's whatever it means to you. You just have to showcase that through a beautiful photo that you've taken and used all of my editing techniques. Or I guess you don't have to use my editing techniques, but I'll be sad if you didn't. The contest runs from August 14th to September 15th, and for more details on the contest, click the link in the description box below. And that is it, that is all. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you liked it, please give it a like down below, subscribe if you're not already, and hit the notification bell to get notified for all future videos, and I will see you in the next one. Enjoy being a pro now. Okay, this time it's real.